Good morning, everyone. I am your friend Godfrey Esho, reaching you from Boston, Massachusetts. It's 2 a.m. Eastern Time, but it's just now that I got the time and the inspiration to record this video for you. I remember that after our last Zoom meeting, some people requested videos. The reason why you didn't get it is because the quality wasn't too good. You know how bad Cameroonian connections are. So recording a Zoom meeting, it's kind of it's not a very good experience. So I decided to do this brief webinar for you, and I hope that you will work with it today and tomorrow. Polish up your applications, and then for those of you who will attend the Zoom meeting on Friday night, it will be a good thing if we spend most of the time actually discussing your projects. So what I have for you is a framework that you can apply to any project. And before we proceed, let me give you this disclaimer. I will read it as it is. This presentation is for educational purposes only. The author has no affiliation with the IREX Community Solutions Program or the United States Embassy. It is good practice for candidates to discuss their projects with their mentors and supervisors, and even give their essays for proofreading to peers. It is, however, unprofessional for candidates to submit a piece of work that is not their original creation or that was done in part or in its entirety by someone else. With this understanding, this presentation aims to equip candidates with general guidelines that they can independently apply to improve the quality of their original applications. So I hope this puts all of us in the clear. I am not doing this because I am influencing anybody's application. I don't have any insider information. My presentation and all the work I do is based on my experience, my leadership experience, which I've gathered from the age of 12 till now. I am 39 years old. So you can imagine for how many years I have been in leadership and in various environments and roles. Fortunately, I have participated in a number of international leadership fellowships. I've won a number of awards. I have sat on selection committees for some international competitions. So my approach to leadership is not really the textbook approach. I work more from experience because through experience I know what works. So in that light, I'm quite confident with what I teach, and I challenge you to put it to work because that's the only way you can prove whether it works or not. But again, leadership is about being you, so there is no hard and fast rule when it comes to leadership. What we can do as mentors and teachers is give you a framework within which you can orchestrate your leadership work. So the first slide talks about establishing your leadership framework. Before we go into that, I want to let you know that this presentation is in two parts. The first part gives you a conceptual framework of how I view leadership in terms of your leadership framework, your leadership impact, and your leadership platform. So if you take time to establish a philosophical basis of your leadership, if you take time to analyze yourself and your project, if you take time to create a model through which you communicate your impact, it becomes very easy for you to answer any question in any environment at any given time, because having a clear idea of who you are as a leader, what community you're working in, what problem you're solving, and how you are assessing your impact. That is it. Once you have that leadership vocabulary, it becomes very easy for you to communicate. I mean, transmit that confidence that you are a leader. Programs like Community Solutions Program, they are not really looking for your particular project. They are looking for the leader in you. And the leader in you, it is the language you use to communicate that makes people to identify you as a leader. So the first part of this presentation is about the framework, the vocabulary, the skills that you need to embody. When we're done with that, we will now go to the questions that make up your essay, and you see how what we have built in this first part applies in answering those questions. So what do we mean by a leadership framework? A leadership framework basically is the 5 philosophical questions. What is the problem you're solving? Why is this problem personal to you? Where are you solving this problem? In other words, what community are you working in? Who is benefiting from the value you're creating? And finally, when? What is the timeline of your project activity? Because again, timing is of the utmost essence. Imagine that you're talking about teaching children in the community, children who do not have access to the classroom because of conflict. When you put that project within the time frame of the conflict, you have helped to justify that problem. So timing is very important. Needs change. So if you don't put a timestamp on your project or your impact, it becomes difficult to weigh its importance. Personal. Why does a problem need to be personal to you? Because leadership, it's about uniqueness. Leadership is about innovation. Leadership is about authenticity. Leadership is about being genuine. So if a problem does not appeal to you personally, if you cannot get emotional about a project, if you don't have a personal experience that makes you identify with the problem you're solving, then maybe you're just doing a job. And of course, there are many people who run NGOs, but they're not being leaders. They're just doing a job because the NGO helps them get money and maybe win some social influence. So when you develop your leadership IQ, you get to that level where you can tell very clearly that it doesn't matter whether somebody has won a grant from which UN body and is controlling how many hundreds of millions in the community. That doesn't make you a leader, because it could as well just be a job. What makes you a leader is, or let me say, one of the things that makes you a leader is that the problem you are solving is a problem that is personal to you. When your heart is in a project, it becomes a passion. And that is where you start seeing the transformational dimension of leadership. So addressing the question, what problem are you solving? The easiest way to approach it is to just look at the Sustainable Development Goals. In your IREX application, you also have what they call focus areas. I want to bet you that in this 21st century, well, at least for the next 2 decades, there is no leadership program you will ever be part of whose focus areas are not gleaned from the Sustainable Development Goals. Remember, we started with the Millennium Development Goals some decades ago, and then zoned in on the Sustainable Development Goals. The United Nations has worked on this for decades. And when we talk about the United Nations, we talk about the member countries of the United Nations. So this is kind of a validated framework of the grand global challenges, the grand global humanitarian challenges. And so if you are not addressing an issue that falls on this list of the Sustainable Development Goals, then you are not relevant. So always start with the Sustainable Development Goals. My rule of thumb is look for about 3 Sustainable Development Goals and then build a leadership activity that is at the intersection of those 3. That will make you irresistible. Now, the next step, after establishing your leadership framework, the next step is to do your self-analysis. Those of you who have been to business school or who have some project management experience, you know what they call the SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for the analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, when we talk of SWOT, we immediately think of projects, companies, businesses, and so on. But I want to draw your attention to something. If you don't do your personal SWOT, then the SWOT you're doing for your project is useless, because the person who will make that project work is you. It's like there's no point having a brand new car with a dysfunctional driver. So start with a personal SWOT. And how do you go about doing your personal SWOT analysis? S stands for your strengths. And by strengths, we're looking at the intrinsic qualities. Intrinsic means internal, things that pertain to you, right? So what are those intrinsic qualities that constitute your strengths? And by intrinsic qualities, we're talking about knowledge, skill, experience, and networks. That is why this is where your CV comes in also. What's your educational profile? What's your work experience? What's your community experience? Or the combination of specialized knowledge, skills, experiences, and networks, partnerships that make you a unique person. Those are your strengths. The flip side of your strengths is your weaknesses. Now, when you judge yourself and the project that you're carrying out or the aspirations that you have in life, what is missing? What is the extra knowledge you need to gain? What are the extra skills you need to acquire? What are the extra experiences you need to gain? What are the extra networks or partnerships you need to build? These now go under your weaknesses, the things that are lacking. But I want to point out something, that the word weaknesses is a bit misleading, because it makes people shy away from doing their SWOT analysis, because they don't want to acknowledge that they are weak or that they have weaknesses. The moment you identify your weaknesses, they are no longer weaknesses. You have established needs, opportunities for growth. Do you get the logic? So when you're doing your SWOT analysis, when you come to weaknesses, they are not saying that you should name all your bad habits and then tell them to the world so that the world should crucify you. No. The idea is for you to identify those weaknesses, things that can sabotage your project if you don't pay attention to them. But because you now know them, you can mitigate them through what we call a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy. We will talk about that again when we come to threats. So the next one is opportunities. Your opportunities are the extrinsic factors, the factors that exist now outside in your environment, right? So your environmental, the environment, the culture, the political landscape, social trends, technology, natural, phenomena. everything in your external environment that helps your project, that promotes your project, that serves as a push to your project. That is an opportunity. Then the flip side of it, anything in your environment that threatens your project, anything in your environment that can potentially sabotage your project, that is a threat. So like natural disasters, conflict, maybe the attitudes of people toward your project, the existence of competition in case of a business, those are threats. So when you combine your strengths and your opportunities, you have this set of qualities we call gifts. These are things, these are assets that you bring to the environment that you find yourself in. When you combine your weaknesses and threats, you have your needs or your liabilities. But like I said, they are not really liabilities now that you have identified them, because you convert liabilities into assets by introducing something called a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy. In the case of leadership and education, the program you're applying for is an opportunity for you to gain the knowledge you need, gain the skills you need, gain the experiences you need, build the new partnerships you need, right? So because you've identified your needs and a platform that can help you fill those needs, you are now going to convert those needs into assets. And that's how the dynamic goes. Now, the third step is to operationalize your leadership impact. Impact is change. The impact is the good you do. But the problem with most people is that they have no idea what exactly they have accomplished in the community. So there's this wonderful lady I met since 2012. Her name is Sidonie. So I've known Sidonie for 8 years now. And Sidonie is a very quiet, docile kind of person, very humble. If you don't push her, you will not find out what she's doing. But when you see what she's doing, it can make you cry. Now, a few months ago, after a long struggle to reach her, I finally got in touch with Sidonie and found out that she has been spending all her time in Ndop, not even in Ndop town, in the villages in Ngoketunja division. For 2 years now, she and her team have been running outreach education programs. They set up satellite schools in villages, and they call that project Rescue Her Education. Now, for God's sake, that is one of the most impactful projects that I have come across this year. But guess what? Sidonie has not written that project anywhere. She has not done any YouTube presentation. She has not attended any conference since she started this project, and the list just goes on. So this is one area that young Cameroonian leaders need to really zone in on, pay attention to. You need to be able to communicate your impact, because it is when people know what you're doing that they are able to partner with you and give you the support you need. It is when people know what you are doing that you're able to stand out as a role model. Remember that communicating your impact is not about you winning praise, because some of you have this mistaken notion that you want to be humble or whatever, you don't want to show off. It's a lie. The world needs leaders. Schools don't train leaders. Leaders are mentored by other leaders. So when you show up, that is how people identify you as a role model and learn from your best practices. So communicating your impact is very crucial. And I've been able to come up with a formula that you will find very easy to use. I call it the ISMTS formula. And I stands for innovative. In other words, when someone asks you, what are you doing? Start with I. Communicate how different your project is. Communicate how unique your project is. Start with the bang, because if you don't catch somebody's attention with something different, something unusual that you're doing, they'll not want to listen to you, right? Nobody has time. Okay. S stands for specific. Give a name to the thing you're doing. It should be something tangible, like, okay, we set up satellite schools in remote villages to teach children who have been deprived of education due to the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon. That is something tangible. Now, M stands for measurable. Your impact should reflect some qualitative or quantitative change. So if you say that over the past 2 years, through our satellite schools in remote villages, we have taught 3,000 children aged 3 to 13. Okay, that is something that we can measure, not so we can count. R stands for relevant. Relevant to what? Relevant to the problem you said you were solving. So you now see where your leadership framework comes in. By doing your leadership framework, you did an analysis of the problem that you are solving, showed how pertinent that problem is, showed how engaged you are in that project, showed who is affected by that project, what environment you're carrying out that project in, within what time frame. So when you are communicating your impact, the impact you say you're creating should clearly reflect the problem that you set out to solve. So you don't say that, okay, the problem in my community right now is that due to overcrowding in cities like Douala and Yaoundé, what example can we give? There's a high incidence of communicable diseases. Let's say you're a public health person, so your problem is high incidence of communicable diseases, which makes it a very risky environment for COVID-19. And then when you're communicating your impact, you go and you're talking about distribution of food stuff. So that's how some of you, so because you have seen maybe some donor is offering food stuff, you grab food stuff and you go and distribute, and then you come and report it in your project. Meanwhile, you started off by talking about exposure to COVID-19 due to overcrowding. So the impact you're communicating should be clearly related to the problem that you set out to solve. Then let us look at timeline or time bound. T stands for time bound. If you notice, all the examples I have given about impact, I've always given them in terms of what? Over the past 2 years, over the past year, over the past 12 months. That's how you communicate impact. So you should say what you did over what time frame, because what I did 10 years ago is really of no relevance today. I mean, when it comes to a context like this, Community Solutions Program 2021, right? So I may have changed lives in 2010, but what a program like this is looking for is leadership potential that is relevant to the current needs of your environment. So if you don't locate your impact within a time frame that is reasonable for the program that you're part of, it becomes difficult for people to determine whether you're suitable for that program or not. Finally, S stands for sustainable. And the famous sanitary towel example. So one person goes to a community and distributes sanitary towels to young girls and comes out and she's happy that she has done a project. Question: what happens the following month when those girls need sanitary towels and you're not there? So what you have done is that you have done charity. And I don't give any apologies when I say that charity paralyzes. I don't like charity. Charity weakens people. If you apply some small creative thinking, you always find ways through which you will help people by empowering them rather than by making them feel sorry for themselves. So when you make people feel that they are in need, then you perpetuate the need. So poverty engenders more poverty. But if you say, okay, you had this sanitary towel project in mind, and you decided to think like my sister Ngum, Doris in my 16 Boya. You go to the community and you teach young women how to use good quality material to sew reusable sanitary towels, and then train them on how to sanitize these sanitary towels for reuse. What you have done is that you've created a sustainable solution. This solution will remain even after you have left. And even more, these people will be able to do this as a source of income. So that's double empowerment. And that is how you should be thinking as a leader. So that's the ISMTS formula. ISMRTS. And that's how you communicate impact in a way that, cannot leave people indifferent. So in the next part of this presentation, I will be looking at some questions that you find on your essays. Your essays, they come in the form of questions that you're supposed to answer and with specific word counts. So if you have actually followed this first part of this presentation, then you would have built the material that you need to write wonderful essays that have a high potential of getting you selected for this program. So I'll stop this video here so that you don't have to spend too much time on one video, and making them shorter will also make it easier to upload and download. So I'll do the next part of the presentation in another video. Thank you very much for your attention. I am Godfrey ESOH.